Wow, we've just had a bunch of people arrive here. So good morning, welcome, or good afternoon, I guess, depending on your time zone. My name is Richard Haugen, and this is the Phoenix Business Consulting webinar on SAP Concur. We're just going to get going right at the top of the hour, just to wait for a few more people to filter in. Just housekeeping again, please feel free to submit any questions you have in the chat section of the Zoom webinar. We're going to keep all the mics muted during the webinar, and then we'll have a Q&A section after. So please stay around for that. And I think we're at the top of the hour +1, so let's get going. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start just a high-level introduction, and we're going to just talk a little bit about Phoenix and Concur, and then we'll jump into some top tips on how to manage travel and expense management. Then we're going to hand it over to Philip from Concur, who's going to walk us through a live demonstration of the software in a couple areas. And then again, as I mentioned, we'll come back for an open Q&A. A lot of you are probably already familiar with us here at Phoenix. We've been in the public sector for over 20 years, initially starting with the ECC product. And a lot of our, we have been doing this a very long time. We actually, some of our people helped write the SAP best practices for business or SAP ECC. And as time's come on, we've evolved and grown with the SAP platform. We are now certified to support Cell. And actually, we're working with a lot of customers now to upgrade from ECC into S/4HANA. We've expanded also into SuccessFactors, Ariba, and as mentioned, Concur, and even the newest SAP ERP, SAP Business by Design. We've been doing this for 20 years. One of the things I like to point out that unusual for our industry is that we've been doing this for 20 years and we have a 100% success rate. We have no failed implementations, and I think that really kind of stands us out in our industry. And it just really speaks to the depth of our expertise in our field. We have over 70 public sector clients that we are supporting on an ongoing sort of application or managed applications process right now. Maybe a few of you recognize your own logos in this area. We want to talk today, and what we're really here today to talk about is Concur and adding Concur to your SAP platform and footprint. So a lot of you have started out with ECC, you've been running it for maybe 15 years in some cases. And as this platform has grown, SAP has also grown and evolved. And so from what was traditionally a premise-oriented architecture, which is fairly standalone, and everything was heavy lift integrations to get it to work together, SAP has been accumulating sort of a family of applications like SuccessFactors, Fieldglass, Ariba, and as very specially here today, Concur, where they've added these applications and now they're bringing them all together, and they would say in the intelligence suite and building around the S4 application, in S4HANA application architecture to bring that all together so that it's really eventually going to be a seamless experience. So the users will maybe be accessing Concur information or SuccessFactors information within a single application footprint, so that they'll be getting information from different applications, but they won't necessarily see the underlying application behind it. Concur, as many of you are aware, is the undisputed leader in the market for, I think, well over a decade now in travel and expense management. They've got over, I think, 46,000 customers in 150 countries. I think over 750 public sector customers around the world. And really what they're doing is they've, with their addition to SAP, it's very nice because they're taking that very user-focused and very specific verticalized application where they're really the best at travel and expense management, and we're able to then bring that into the SAP environment to expand that. Because it really is, for a lot of organizations, when you think about travel and expense, it's, they may have automated a lot of stuff, but a lot of travel and expense is still done on paper. And then, the automated process is what we call ABWA, which stands for approval by walking around. But in our current environment, it's not possible anymore, right? So that just broke because all of a sudden we're all remote, or a lot of us are remote. So it's one of these areas where, because it's so paper-based, and it's really been sort of the thing that's left behind, because not a lot of companies would say it's so, quote, mission critical. It's something that you do every day and it's part of your organizational process, but it's one of those things that hasn't necessarily been addressed as well as it could. And so this has actually led to a lot of issues for organizations. Number one is compliance, where, end users want to comply. They want to follow the process because that can jam up their ability to get reimbursed in a timely fashion. So one thing is, when you think about how can we improve your travel and expense process, number one is you want to have a clear travel and expense policy so that people know what they need to do and how to do it, and they know what they can expense and what they can't. And so a good system will be able to seamlessly put that out there and then lead people to the correct policy, lead people to compliance instead of correcting them when they don't comply. The other thing where a lot of companies can benefit is automation. So there's actually a survey that Concur did, and about 90% of users expressed frustration waiting for their expenses to get processed. And a lot of this is due to, again, the manual processes. So automation takes time out of the process, makes it more efficient, frees your people to do their sort of core job instead of expense, unless that's what is their core job. And then mobility, because the sooner, if we can push capture of the data, for example, like an expense report receipt, closer to the expense when the expense was incurred, we're going to increase our compliance and we're going to increase our accuracy. And then also we're going to conveniently also, if you're doing that, you're by a byproduct that is automation. And then also building on that, it's going to, if you have a good application, you'll also be able to say, hey, this is in or out of expense policy. So if you're able to push that out to the mobile, it'll flow back through the rest of the organization. You'll capture efficiencies and compliance along the way. Another thing, if a best practice in today's world, is electronic reimbursement. And that same Concur survey, I think they said 60% of their end users there expressed trouble paying personal bills while waiting for reimbursement. So that's a pretty large number of survey respondents saying that, hey, waiting for reimbursement has caused me, I didn't get reimbursed by the time the credit card bill came due, and that put them in a bad spot. So that's really a low-hanging fruit for a lot of organizations. And then, of course, streamlining your time-consuming functions, because I think most employees, when they're looking at expense reports, frankly, some of the reasons they're quite often not timely is because they view it as a burden. And so actually there's another number off that same survey, which is 84% of users would think more highly of their employee if their expense reporting process was better and easier to use. So it's really something where, if we think today's world where, how can we improve our users' experience, improve our employee satisfaction, and improve our compliance, and through the whole process, you're going to save money. This is really where Concur is, and they're really the best at it. So I'm going to hand it over now to Philip from Concur, and we'll go from there.
So appreciate it, Richard, for setting the stage there, really, for what Concur is doing to help with a lot of these processes. And the work environment, the job overall for us is changing, where we have to manage cash, we have to get accurate GL postings happening, keep things in line with budget, and get things paid on time. But on top of that, we have more and more compliance responsibilities we need to deal with. We have that user satisfaction piece to make sure everything's working appropriately and quickly for those end users, and we're constantly partnering with IT as well. And we know what a lot of those challenges, to optimize these processes. We have a ton of volume, very manual processes, and we're dealing with those expectations of employees and users being kind of, on the lower end. And we have a lack of control around the compliance, and we have a lot of what we call invisible spend, where you might have a general number for travel and expenses in your GL system, but you don't really know what makes up that spend. So with Concur, we're bringing all of this data together throughout the entire organization, whether that be through different travel suppliers, out-of-pocket expenses, credit card expenses, and then bringing in data from different consumer applications by partnering with different airlines, hotels, Uber, Lyft, to get that data coming into Concur automatically for users, so they don't have to track all these receipts down, and make this process seamless for them. And when we bring all this data together, all these processes together, we're getting that visibility into all of that employee initiated spend into one spot. We're really giving them the ability to be more productive and to really concentrate on their true jobs, not spending so much time filling out expense reports. But at the same time, bringing in the controls and policy enforcement for the organization so expense filers, users know what those rules are, and we can ensure that they're spending the organization's money appropriately. At the same time, we're making sure we can still get data in and out, whether it be HR systems, ERP systems, payroll systems, we're still going to make sure that data flows appropriately. And when we look at an overall travel and expense program, we see it kind of 4 high levels. We need to request and book travel, and obviously that's down a little bit in today's environment, and hopefully we'll get back to having more of that. But we're also going to be spending money, whether we're traveling or even working from home. Now there's money that needs to be spent, and we need to capture how we're spending that money, capture those receipts, and make the process simple. And then ultimately we need to reimburse, whether the employees directly or to agency credit cards as well. And through these high-level processes, we're bringing multiple different technologies into play. The first thing is going to be one platform, one ecosystem, if you will, that covers requesting travel, booking travel, capturing my expense reports, getting reimbursed. We can put that all into one system so there's not multiple places to go. And then we're bringing in tools like machine learning, artificial intelligence, 21st century technology to make this process simple for all of the end users to start reading receipts, creating expenses for me, having expense reports created automatically so I don't have to do all the manual entry and staple receipts, and then, so the accountant on the back end doesn't have to manually enter all this stuff. And then we open up our system too to different suppliers to help with this process, like I mentioned with, like an Uber or an Lyft, to get those receipts to automatically come into Concur so I don't have to worry about carrying around all those receipts. And then through all this, we're going to also provide the data and analytics around this so you can start to see exactly where the spend is going and really help drive better business decisions as we move forward so we know where all that spend is happening. And as we look at this, we have to look at it also from a few different vantage points, from the user themselves, the manager or the approver of these expenses, and then really the administrative back office side of this as well. So, as we look at through all these different processes, we know today, there's not a lot of traveling happens. So let's start simple, and then I want to come back here because I'm very optimistic, travel is going to come back and we're going to have to, go back to some of those processes. But, if we look at it simply for now, there's some information here I just want to go over, not go into every single detail, but you'll see different things. We have what basically I call a work to zero initiative. I have different things out here where I have travel requests. I might have invoices, available expenses, which is going to be, agency credit card charges, or if I've taken pictures of receipts, things I need to put on an expense report. And then I also have any open reports that I've created that I haven't submitted yet. Also be able to book travel in here and even do invoices. But as we look at this, it's a very permission-based system, so you dictate who gets access to what in this system. If I never need to do invoices, we won't do that. If I'm never going to travel, you don't need to give me that permission. So I just wanted to point out a few of those things. But one of the things I want to look at, if we look at, things that are happening today, we're all working from home, and a lot of organizations and different agencies are incurring a lot of more home office type expenses. So, I like Richard's term of, always walking around for these approvals, and, bringing this system in, automating things. We can do our expense reports anytime, anywhere. And you see this open report I have here for some home office expenses. So it's very simple for me to fill out information here and bring in, my home internet that the agency is reimbursing me for, and simply scan in and attach the receipt to that. So I have it here, right here in my expense report. Just some other office supplies that I had to purchase for home. I can take pictures of those receipts, and we'll go into a little more detail into this in a few minutes. And then I did have to travel to an appointment, and I did put in my car mileage here, and I see that I actually only did it for one way there. I can actually come in here and put some additional mileage that I had on that day. And we'll just say this was, for an appointment I had to go to. And we can put in the addresses where we're going, but we actually integrate directly with Google Maps as well. So I'm just going to, quickly put in some information here of where I came and where I went from to automatically start calculating my mileage And it's very easy to just enter this information in and automatically calculate my mileage. So I'm going to put that in. And what it's going to do is automatically bring in the different reimbursements rates. If it's the IRS rate we have, we can bring that in, or if it's any other custom rates that you have. But it's very simple for me to fill out this information and create my expense report and get this submitted. Now, I really wanted to look at it from this perspective because we do have a lot of people working from home right now. The other piece I wanted to show with this as well is, some of the mobility that we have to bring this information in as well. If I just, bring up my phone really quickly here, I'm just going to slide this over. Being that we're a cloud-based software system, we have mobile apps as well. And as things happen online or happen on the mobile app, it's going to update accordingly. And just to give you a quick view into the mobile app, we have things in here such as our trips that we may have, any expenses or expense reports that I'm working on. And if I go into that expense report, I have that same home office expense here, and I have my, my home internet, office supplies. You saw that car mileage just pop in there that I updated online. So we have the ability to do this on our mobile devices as well. I wanted to go through this, fairly simple example there from, us working from home these days. But I do want to go back as well to talk about how, bringing all of this together from a travel and expense perspective, how we're, even making it that much more easier when we do get back to normal and we're out traveling again. So let me come back here. Bear with me one second to get this presentation back up. So we come back here and we talk about, these higher level processes. If we kind of start with this from the booking travel perspective, most public sector organizations we go into, we need to get a pre-trip authorization or get that pre-trip approval before we go anywhere. So we need to be able to go in and forecast, what are we going to spend on this trip if we go anywhere? I need to get them into the correct approval flows and even start allocating these things out to the different particular departments, funds, grants, what have you. And then from there, once I get that approval, I need to be able to simply book my travel, not have any hiccups there, and actually be guided to appropriate spend within the organization. So I'm just going to give a quick example of what that can look like and kind of walk through a day in the life of a traveler if I have to do this, and then ultimately incur expenses and put them on an expense report. So let me go back online here. And you saw I had this home office expenses all set up, but I'm going to come back to the main landing page here. And you saw I had the different requests, travel, expense. I'm going to go on this request, which is our pre-trip approval process. And just to give you a quick example, I have a couple different things. I have one that's approved here. Another that I haven't submitted yet. This is going to be just a quick trip to Boston. And all I need to do here is come in and put, name this request, where am I going, when am I going? And then from there, I can put in different segments of travel. That'd be air, car rental, hotel. We can bring train in here as well. And I give an estimate of those amounts. And then it'll start to create expenses for me. And then I can add in additional expenses that I know that I'm going to incur on this trip. And then we simply submit this into a workflow, whether that be, just one step up to my manager, if it needs to go to a particular budget manager, what have you. We can help accommodate those workflows and get the correct approvals on this. So it is really that simple to say, hey, here's where I'm going, this is what it's going to cost, and submit that for approval. And what ends up happening from there is I get that approval. I now know it's okay to book my travel. And when I go in to book my travel, if you've booked travel anywhere for yourself, whether it be business or personal, you can book travel in Concur. You'll see on the left here basic information. Where am I coming from? Where am I going? When do I want to go? Do I need a rental car? Do I need a hotel? And put in your search parameters. The difference with Concur is once I do search for this, it's going to bring up a matrix of flights that I have here. And you'll start to see things. We can bring in the agency's preferred vendors. We start to guide travelers to the appropriate spend within the organization. And they have this list of all these flights, and we can bring in additional rules where, some more expensive flights out here where we're actually saying that, this is $100 more, at least $100 more than the least logical airfare that's out there. And if I want to book that, I have to give reasons why I'm booking this, and it's going to require some additional approval. So we're bringing in compliance rules right into the booking process up front. For this example, we would just want to go with the appropriate in compliance airfare here. And then, same thing from a hotel perspective. Once I choose my flight, it's going to bring up my hotel search. And you'll see here too, we can bring in per diem limits right into this booking tool. So if I need to get a hotel, I can see exactly what the lodging per diem limit is for the area that I'm traveling to. And I could come through here again, bring in different rules for the organization. Say, even though the per diem rate might be $256, we're going to actually require approval for anything over $200. So you see how you can bring in these rules and compliance right into the travel booking process. So again, very simple process to get that pre-trip approval and then go out and get the travel booking done as well, but we're still constantly guiding travelers and users as they're doing this to spend the agency's money appropriately. Let me come back here. One second. So again, walking through that pre-trip authorization process, very simple. Get those routed for the correct approvals and get the forecast total amount of those trips. Very simple to book travel, get guided to the organization's policies. And I didn't mention, you'll also have, you can get travel management company or travel agency support behind that as well. Now, obviously, we get that pre-trip approval, we book our travel, we're obviously going to go somewhere, we're going to incur expenses. We're going to spend money on the agency's behalf, and we need to capture how we're spending that money to make the expense reporting process easier. So as we build out expense reports, we need to make this process extremely simple for the users. We need to essentially eliminate manual entry, have expense reports that are writing themselves, and get them routed for the correct approvals as well. But we also need to be able to do this on our mobile devices, which I gave you, a quick glimpse into, but we'll look into a little bit more in a minute here. But still, as we're doing our expense reports, we need to be guided to the organization's policy, so I know that I'm have spent the money appropriately and getting reimbursed appropriately. And through that, we need to be able to capture these receipts by simply just taking a picture of a receipt and having expenses created for me, not taking a picture for something I have to email later or print out later or attach to something later. It's actually going to create an expense for me. And then show you how we also partner with a wide variety of travel suppliers to get receipts automatically coming into Concur. And then also using technology on our mobile devices like GPS and accelerometers that, if you didn't know, that are in your mobile devices already. We leverage that technology to automatically track mileage as we're out driving. So what I want to do is go bring up my phone here again. Bear with me 1 second to get that up. Oh, bear with me. I lost my connection. Just give me 1 second here. Get my phone back up. All right, there we go. So I brought you into the mobile app earlier, and we talked about some of the simple home office expenses, but whether they're simple home office expenses or we're out traveling, regardless, we're getting receipts for things. We need an easy way to handle these receipts instead of having them pile up in a wallet or a purse to have the ink start fading or they start getting wrinkled up, or worst case, we lose them. So as we incur expenses, I'm going to go into the mobile app here, and you'll see down in the bottom left corner, there's a little camera icon. It says Expense It. And what that's going to do is actually go directly into the camera on my phone. And I have a receipt here. So we took that trip from, if you saw, from Newark, New Jersey to down to DC. I have a parking receipt here from the Newark airport. And you'll see I'm going to take a quick picture of that, and it crops down the image real nice for me, and it's going to zoom in on that, and you'll see it's going to actually ask me to verify the amount. And this is actually a good example where it didn't quite read the amount exactly. And actually, I'm going to take another quick picture of that because I hit that it was correct, and it was not correct. But again, let me take that picture. It's going to quickly verify the amount, and if it is incorrect for any reason, I can come in here and say, no, hey, that's actually $68, but it's actually going to quickly verify that amount. And then from there, it's actually going to start analyzing this receipt. Again, it's not having an image here for me to email somewhere later, attached to something later. It's actually looking at all the data on that receipt, lifting data off of it, like the vendor, the dates, the amounts, and actually creating an expense for me. And if you saw it kind of switch there at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and click in there. You see, just based on the image of that receipt, it has the $68. it put it as parking on March 10th at Newark Airport in Newark, New Jersey. Now, if you think about that for a second, all I did was take a picture of that receipt, and it's coming through here and creating that expense for me. And now I don't have to worry about what I did with that receipt. It's stored in the system for me. I have the expense created for me. I can automatically just move this to an expense report. I can save it for later when I finally do want to submit my expense report. But all that is done for me just by taking a picture of the receipt. Now, if I go back to the main screen here, another thing, I added some mileage onto that expense report when we first started, and we do integrate directly with Google Maps and can bring that information in so you can have that backup right into the system. But another, way we can capture this stuff, especially for those that are on the road quite often, if you look down on the bottom here, there's another icon for mileage. I'm going to bring that up. I can enter manually here, which will bring me to Google Maps, and I put in my addresses. Or you'll see this other thing for drive settings, where actually let me turn it off first. What Concur Drive does is we can actually track mileage using technology that's in the phone, like GPS or an accelerometer that knows whether you're walking, running, or driving. And what we can do is have this off so it never tracks me. I can have it be user initiated, which means I go into the Concur mobile app and I say, hey, start tracking my mileage. I know that I'm driving for business right now. And then from there, what I like to do is if I'm on the road constantly, I can actually schedule this to track me and automatically capture my mileage for me. So as soon as it senses that I'm starting to drive, it's going to start tracking my mileage, and it'll stop once it knows I'm stopped. And what we get from there, you'll see on the main screen here, I have 2 items to upload. I actually took a trip out to the grocery store last night because I knew we were going to have to demonstrate this today. So last night I drove to the grocery store and I had this on, and it automatically tracked me from my house directly to the grocery store and tracked my mileage to the exact 1/10 of a mile. And from here, from a user's perspective, I don't have to bring in odometer readings. I don't have to remember the addresses. It's automatically tracking for me. And from a finance back office perspective, we now realistically have a receipt for that one item we've never had a receipt for. And you have visibility into a lot of these transactions as they're happening as well. And from here, I can just upload these 2 transactions to my list of expenses, and they're ready to be put onto an expense report. So again, making this process easy for end users right in their, in the palm of their hands on their mobile devices. One thing I do want to come back to, we talk about this, the kind of the cloud-based system being in here, and as we make updates on the phone, that is going to update directly online as well. And when we come back online here, we'll see a few different things here. I can go into now my list of available expenses. There's some other things in here, and we'll talk about them in a second. But you'll see here's that Newark Airport parking charge I had. Here's the image of that receipt. It's here ready for me to put on to an expense report. Here's the mileage charges right now. The only reason those are zeros right now is because it doesn't have the mileage calculation. As soon as I put that onto an expense report, it's going to bring in the reimbursement rates for mileage and do that calculation automatically. But one thing I want to point out is you heard me mention, having expense reports that write themselves. So as we're out traveling or we're just incurring expenses, if I have an agency credit card, those transactions are automatically going to come into my Concur profile. I'm going to be taking pictures of receipts as I'm incurring expenses. Those are going to come into my Concur profile. I mentioned having different connections with travel suppliers, Uber, Lyft. That information is going to automatically come into my Concur profile as well. And if we think about that one platform that I talked about where we can request to travel, we can book our travel, and we can do our expense reports, being that's all in one system, all this information is tied together for the user is going to help them dramatically with their expense reports. If I go back to that original pre-trip approval that I wanted to take this trip, I was going to come from Newark to Washington. I've had that approved. I've taken the trip. I've incurred expenses. Now I'm ready to get my expense report done and submitted. I can come back here and you'll see this action to expense this request. I'm going to go ahead and click expense. And what's going to happen is it's going to start to build an expense report for me. And what's going to happen here, just going to bring up the expense report header. We're going to give it a name. which will default in there. What's the date of the report? We can add in business purpose comments. We can allocate this out to different departments, projects, what have you. This is very customizable for what you want users to see and what you want them to input. But from here, this is just a report header. I'm going to click next, and what's going to pop up actually is asking me if I have any travel allowances or if I have any per diems I need to claim for this trip. You know, in the far majority of public sector organizations we go into do have some sort of meal per diem, and a lot of times they're going off the government GSA rates. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes here. And to calculate per diems, we need to know, you know, where I was and the dates and times where I was. I can fill out that information manually here, or being that I booked travel within Concur, the system knows I can actually just import an itinerary. So I have this itinerary for my travel. I'm going to check that and import that. It's automatically going to bring up the locations to start those calculations. So I just hit next. It just quickly verifies here's the itinerary that you're using. And then automatically here, it has the allowance calculated out. You know, and you'll notice, you know, the 2 days in the middle are at $71, and the first day and the last day are 75% of that. That's bringing in the GSA calculations. We're only reimbursing 75% for the days of travel. Additionally, if any meals were provided while I was traveling, I can say, you know, lunch was provided these 2 days, and you'll see those calculations automatically update. And I know dinner was provided that first night as well. And then I'm going to go create expenses. So it's automatically going to create the daily allowance for my meals. And then it's also going to bring in all of these expenses that were related to that trip. So I have the airfare that came in. I have a taxi that I did, the hotel, another breakfast, some office equipment I had to purchase when I was out there. So it automatically brought in all of that information, being that we have all of these processes tied together. And then from there, it automatically created my expense report. It was an expense report that wrote itself. Now, there's a handful of things that are happening here, some different icons that I want to go over, but I want to kind of take some of these one by one. So you saw the daily allowance that came in that we calculated from the GSA tables, or we can bring in custom per diem rates as well. There's a taxi charge that came in here because of the date. It knew that it was part of this trip. This came in on my agency credit card that we have automatically assigned to me. And we integrate directly with Uber, so it's going to automatically send that receipt in for me. For the hotel, you'll see here, we have, again, came in from my agency credit card. I have an e-receipt directly from the hotel here. This came directly from Marriott. I didn't even have to hold on to this receipt. It was sent directly into Concur. And this is an e-receipt, which means electronic receipt. All of this actually becomes data on this receipt. It's not just an image. And with that, we can have the system automatically itemize out my entire hotel bill. If you've ever had to itemize a hotel for an expense report, whether in a system or manually, it's tough to go through every one of these line items. We're bringing that data in to automatically do this for you. And on top of that, you're going to see some other icons here. It read that data and said that it was minibar and movie charges. I don't know of any agencies that do allow that in their policies. This is automatically marked as a personal expense, and I'm not going to get reimbursed for. You also see I had a dinner at the hotel, and it's giving me a red asterisk. Well, it's saying, hey, you're already getting a per diem for this. You can't expense the dinner as well. You need to mark this as personal and not be reimbursed for this. So I'm going to go ahead here and mark that as personal and save that. So we're bringing in that policy guidance right into the expense report. And then additionally, you'll see, you know, I have a breakfast here at Starbucks, and it's telling me the same thing. You can't expense additional meals because you already have a per diem out there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that one personal as well. But again, my expense report is done. It takes a matter of minutes, if that, to create the expense report and be done with my expense report. One of the things you might have noticed, you know, I took a picture of that parking charge, and that didn't come in on this expense report. The only reason it didn't is it's taking a lot of that trip information, but it is here. I have this parking charge here. I can look at that, and I can actually bring that on. And the only reason it didn't is wasn't within the date range of that travel, so I didn't view it as part of that trip, but I'm just going to go ahead and move it over, and there it is. So we have all of this information here. And so one of the things I want to point out as well is you'll see these credit card icons, meaning it came in from my agency credit card. If it doesn't have that, that means I paid out of pocket for it. So we can have that in one process. A lot of agencies we see have one process for their credit card expenses and another process for out-of-pocket expenses. We bring that together into one system because we're going to have all of this data. And this is ready to submit now. And if I go to submit this expense report, it's going to first give me kind of the T's and C's. It's going to give me that, I'm agreeing that I'm within policy, that I've attached the appropriate receipts, and then I'm in line with policy, so I'm going to accept and submit that. It's going to tell me right away, okay, where did this go for approval? So it's pending my manager's approval. And I have the report total. You saw there were some personal items there, that the mini bar and the movie. So it gives the totals there, and then there's a total amount due to the employee, and there's the amount due to the credit card as well. And then being that there was some personal charges on the credit card, we can also have a total amount owed to the employee as well. Oops, didn't mean to go up. Let me go back there. So, and what you'll see there now, I've submitted that expense report. Let me go back, sorry. I've submitted that expense report. I'm always going to know the status of that expense report. Right now, it's pending my manager's approval, and we're going to look at it from that perspective in a minute. Anytime that changes, if that goes into another level after my manager for approval, it's going to let me know that. If it goes to a back office audit, it's going to let me know that. And when it's finally being processed for payment and paid, I'm going to get updates on that. So I always know the status of my expense report and when I'm going to get reimbursed or the credit card is going to be paid. Now, if we look at this from a manager's perspective, I've submitted that report, and managers are obviously going to need to approve these expenses. So give me 1 second. I'm actually going to bring up I have a tablet here from a manager's perspective to kind of see what this looks like from the mobile side of things. Give me 1 second. Never works quite as fast as I like to get my screen. Okay, there it goes. So one thing I want to point out, when I come in here, I'm just going to go, we submitted that expense report about a minute or two ago. I got a notification here that I have an expense report to approve. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it's going to take me directly into Concur, directly to that expense report. And I can click in there and see all the details. Again, we're looking at this from the manager's perspective. Here's all the expenses that are there, and it has, if I want to look at that Uber, I can go into the detail, has the receipt here that I can look at all the details, and see all of this information for all the different expenses. I can look at the expense report header. I can look at those travel allowances and what was claimed each day. So I have access to all of this information as a manager right on my mobile device. I can send it back to the employee if I need to, but I'm gonna have to put in, why am I sending it back? What action do they need to take so that I'll approve this? And I can also approve this here as well, and it's going to also have me certify that I say everything is within compliance and everything is appropriate here. So again, very simple for the managers, very similar view that they'll have online as well. And as I approve that, I'm just going to let that approve. Everything's fine there. If I go back to Jerry, who was our user, just give this a quick refresh here. You see it's pending my manager's approval. Now he's approved it. It's actually taken another step up, and it's going to have someone else that's approving this, but I always know the status and where my expense report is. So if we come back here, we talked about a lot of these different steps. We're eliminating manual entry by just taking pictures of receipts, having expenses created for us. And, those expense reports are realistically writing themselves because we have all of that data coming in. We're getting them sent in for the correct approvals. We have that mobility where we can, create, submit expenses anytime, anywhere. We have the guidance to policies giving exceptions for what's wrong with different expenses if there is anything. We've showed you the receipt capture. We can take a picture of a receipt, have expenses automatically created, bringing in e-receipts from Uber, from different hotels, airlines, etc., to have that data ready for us to do our expense reports. And then from a mileage perspective, to automatically track our mileage in our mobile devices, or even just enter in via Google Maps, which is directly integrated. And what all of this does together, when we talk about it from a reimbursement perspective, you have that mobile receipt capture, expense reports writing themselves, the guidance throughout the whole process to policy, electronic workflows that are happening, mobile approvals. At the end of the day, you're getting faster reimbursements to your users, to your employees. And then as these expense reports come through, you saw a lot of information, whether it was on a pre-trip approval, on a travel booking, or really on an expense report. There's a lot of data in there of where money's being spent, how exactly it's being spent. So within Concur, we have a tremendous amount of data. So we need visibility into that data. So with Concur, we have what we call Concur Intelligence. It offers over 200 standard reports of all of this information to look at your spend in multiple different ways. And all of these reports can be scheduled to run in particular time frames or days of the week, days of the month, what have you, and then can automatically be emailed out to others in the organization. You can create your own reports. You can modify the pre-built reports that are there, and we can bring in dashboards as well. So an example from that perspective, kind of high-level dashboards, just to see, what is the trend? What is the spend trending? Where are we spending the most money? What departments? What categories? And we have all of this information just based off users doing their expense reports. Looking at maybe where the bottlenecks are, who's taking forever to approve things or even submit their expenses. And looking at it maybe more from a procurement perspective, but where are we spending the most money? What vendors are we spending the most with that we may have more negotiation power with? Just looking at an overall program, what is the life cycle of an expense report? Are we adopting to our agency credit card spend? And what is the preferred payment method? Or what are the policy exceptions out there, and who's breaking policy the most, or who's spending the most within the organization? And we can bring that down to more of a department manager level as well, to bring in budgetary information and who their top spending employees are. So we can bring in a significant amount of data. And we start to look at it maybe from a potential fraud or compliance issues. We have ways in the system, as managers get the expense reports, are they even looking at the receipts? We can tell if a manager is looking at a receipt or not, or if they're just putting a rubber stamp on those reports as they approve them. A lot of organizations we go into have receipt thresholds where they don't need any receipts for anything under $25. Well, who's constantly submitting things for $24? And it's found a way around that. Duplicate expenses where, I put something on my agency credit card this month and then ask for reimbursement the following month. We have all of this data behind the scenes where we can pull that together to make sure we're catching that and nobody is getting reimbursed for things they shouldn't. And we're talking about, managing accruals, even if you're not doing an accrual at the end of the month, just having visibility into all of the expenses that are into the system, whether they've been submitted or not, or if they're pending approval. We have visibility into all that information. The credit card charges will come in. As I take pictures of receipts, that's spend that we have visibility to. So we have so much visibility, whether that's just to manage the cash flow or to manage the accruals as well. And then from there, being part of SAP, we can start to bring this into the broader picture with like SAP Analytics and bringing the travel information into our procurement information and our external workforce, bringing all of that data together. And at the end of the day, we see a lot of processes like this is we can, everything we just showed you, we can try to fit into this Excel spreadsheet or other manual processes, or we can bring that all together within Concur, that's where everyone is getting a benefit out of this, especially the end users, where they can have all of those different steps in one process and make everything that much easier for them. So I know I did go through a lot of information, and we do want to open this up for some questions. So I'll turn it back to Richard. Are you going to handle that piece, or we're just going to open it up here?
Yeah, I'll open that up. So everyone, thank you very much, Philip. That was great, very detailed, and a lot of great information. So we're going to open this up now for Q&A. There is so for those of you, I think everyone's familiar with Zoom now, but for those of you that aren't familiar, down on the bottom, you should have a Q&A and a chat little icon, so you can click those to submit questions. We're not going to be too picky if it's a Q&A or a chat question, so please feel free to enter your questions there, and depending on the question, we'll assign someone to respond.
Yeah, so I do see there was one question from Douglas about building a, expense report on the mobile device as well, and that, all that functionality that you saw within the expense report online is all available within the mobile app as well. So I kind of jump back and forth because I want to definitely get a view of both. But yes, you can definitely build out those expense reports within the mobile device. And even if you forgot to take a picture while you were out traveling or incurring that expense, as you build your expense report on the mobile device, you can add pictures directly to the expenses. So you can actually go into an expense, say, oh, I need to add a receipt, and take a picture of it right then and there. So yeah, long story short, yes, you can do that all from the mobile device as well.
All right, here's a question here. Is Concur only cloud-based?
Yes, it is. It is just strictly in the cloud. We see, a lot of benefits to that. I think probably the biggest one being storage. Receipt images do take up a lot of space. So we're going to manage that all for you. It is a strictly cloud-based service.
Okay, there's a question from Elizabeth. Do you have to have success factors to integrate to SAP Concur? We are on premise with SAP Portal ESS-MSS. So I don't think, actually, I know the answer to this one. Success factors is not a prerequisite for integration with Concur. I think that's probably something that Hanif or someone may want to answer in a little bit more detail. We may want to follow up with you on that just to get the specifics on the integration. Okay, here's a question from Stephen. Can you rebill expenses to a customer project task via some sort of integration or web service? And Stephen, I know your system, which I think you're referring to, maybe SAP Business by Design or Business One. And the short answer is yes. There's some integration involved. We have to make sure we're passing the appropriate project codes, but those can be project codes and cost center codes can be pushed into Concur so that they're tagged and flagged. And then when you bring them back up, we can pull them out and then rebuild them. Oops. Sorry, there was a question here that Joe Thompson was going to answer. I think something happened. Did someone answer that live? What will happen if approval hierarchy is wrongly set up? Then do we need to reprocess the entire request again? So if you didn't set up the approval hierarchy correct, would you have to reprocess it, or how would you deal with that? If you have to basically put it down and send it up another chain.
Yeah, so I can take that one, Richard. I mean, so if that approval chain is not correct and it goes to the wrong person, it does not have to start over, but there is administrative capabilities to then, if it is found that it is wrong, someone can then put that into the correct approvers queue and then update to have the proper workflow moving forward as well. So it does not have to start completely over.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions out there? Oops. Does Phoenix offer a connector solution for FM/GM integration or build this capacity? Hanif or Mr. Thompson,
Yes.
Would you like to try this?
Yes, I can answer that. Hi, Jennifer. Yes, we are. So we have a Concur demo system and an SAP system, and we're actually building the connectors for, we can get into a lot of detail if you want to talk specifically into more detail about it, but there's a number of different places that'll interface with regards to pre-encumbrance, encumbrance, the actual posting, and so on. So some of the interfaces are pretty standard, like so if you have a GL accounts, cost centers, projects, funds, it'll take that information into Concur, so you only have to change it in one place. The posting from Concur back to SAP, both payroll and AP, is pretty standard. SAP itself has a interface that they've built in the past for the encumbrance pieces of it, the FMGN integration, but certain parts of it need to be changed, and that's what we're going to be doing, and we'll roll that out, and we can demo that shortly. So If we want to have a separate session sometime, we can show you the integration of that. So hopefully I answered your question.
Okay. There is a question as what is the typical time frame for project implementation?
Yeah, I mean, Richard, I mean, if you want to take that one from a Concur perspective, I mean, it really varies on, you know, what we're looking at. Are we doing just Concur expense? Are we bringing the pre-trip approval and the travel piece into it? So it can vary depending on the different services there, you know, and it also varies on the level of implementation effort as well. It's hard to put a number exactly on the project implementation without having a full scope. But I would say, you know, at a minimum for the most time, you know, I think we're looking at about 16 weeks at a minimum, but that can be less, that can be more depending on a wide variety of circumstances.
I think we are hitting our, we have no open questions. We're almost at the top of the hour. So I want to take a moment and thank you all for giving us your time today. We realize that in today's busy world, your time is often your most valuable commodity. So giving us your time for a whole hour of your day is really something. We appreciate you taking this time out of your day to explore Concur and consider it as a potential solution. We thank Philip and the folks from Concur and the rest of the Phoenix team for joining me today. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out and contact us directly, and we will make sure we respond to any questions you may have. Thank you very much. I hope everyone has a great Friday, a great weekend, happy May Day, and stay safe.